Hello, this is Don Cusic with the Music Biz, and today my guest is Tandy Rice with Top Billing International. Tandy, let me begin by asking, how did you get started in the record business?
Don, I backed into it. I went to college in South Carolina. I'm a Middle Tennessee native. I went to college in South Carolina, then after that went into Strategic Air Command, based out of New England. I lived in Maine for 4 years. After being away from home for 8 years, I came back home to get a job. And at that point in my life, I'd never even heard of the music industry. It ended up the first job I was offered was in the music industry. And I took it. And I've been there ever since.
Where was that?
It was at a place called Moeller Talent Incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
They have since gone out of business. Agencies come and go in the field that I'm in. This particular agency came and went.
Now, this is how you learned booking?
No. When I went to work for them, I was in media work, press, television, PR work. And I ultimately purchased. I left there and went to work for another company, Showbiz Incorporated, doing TV work. And then I heard about a booking agency that was for sale, and I bought it, and that was Top Billing. So that's how I got into Top Billing. That was roughly, I'd say, 17 years ago.
So you had to learn booking on the spot?
Right.
On the job. How about management? How did you get into management?
Same way. If you go back in your mind 15, 16, 20 years ago, we didn't have the training processes that the young students have today. They're so much smarter than we were back then, simply because they're exposed to things. There were no schools that taught courses in artist management or anything relating to the music industry. So consequently, the only way to learn anything was just by doing it, hands-on, 3 yards in a cloud of dust type experiences. So I backed into management just like I backed into being in the talent agency business.
Now, who was your first act that you managed?
I've only managed 2 acts, well, 3 acts. The first act that I ever managed was Jerry Clowell from Yazoo City, Mississippi.
Still manage him?
Still manage him 17 years later. I have also managed Jim Ed Brown and Wendy Holcomb, and I do not manage either one of them now. But Jerry Clowell and I are still together.
Didn't you manage Billy Carter?
No.
You represented him for a while.
Right, right. I represented him for personal appearances. Many people thought I managed him, but as you know, this business of managing people encompasses so much more.
And nobody could manage Billy Carter.
Right. Listen, I'm not so sure many people can manage anybody. Managing is a very tough business to get into. There are certain ingredients that have to be necessary in a relationship between the manager and his client, not the least of which is total trust. And how many people do you know, for example, that you would totally turn over your entire life to?
Is that the most important attribute of management, that trust?
Well, without it, there can be no management. So it may be.
Let's go back to booking. How do you book an act?
Well, as a booking agent, we're basically salesmen. I tell my daughter that I'm a flesh peddler. She giggles and laughs about that and says, "Daddy, don't say that." But that's exactly what I am as an agent. And we have a staff of 7 agents at Top Billing, and our job is to find work. And we're not a bit different in that from Temporary Talent or Manpower Incorporated, people who find secretaries, typing positions, people who find clerks, filing positions. We find people who sing positions, gigs.
So you just call, you just get on a phone call, whoever you can?
You better know it. And we have thousands and thousands and thousands of contacts logged in our computers and logged in our filing systems. And we do mass mailings, we advertise constantly, we blitz the telephones constantly. And the orders either come into us by phone, or they come as a result of our calling out. But
okay. Now, in the pop world, you hear talk about tours where people organize 20-city tour, 30-city tour. It doesn't work that way in country, does it?
No, it doesn't. I think the reason is because, well, of course, the pop field is so much bigger than the country field, and the stakes are so much higher. There aren't too many artists in the country music industry that you could take on a 20-city tour and make any money out of. In fact, I don't really know any, except Alabama.
What makes an act appealing? Why does a promoter want them?
Well, because the number of tickets they can sell at the gate. The average country music artist can sell the devil out of tickets so long as the venue he's going to fill up is, say, a high school gym or a small venue. But you take something like Stokely Center over here. Am I right? Stokely?
Murphy Center?
Murphy Center. There probably aren't 2 country music artists in the business that could fill it up alone.
Well, what makes an act appealing? Is it a hit record? Is it a bunch of hit records?
It's a combination of hit records and probably total media exposure as a result of hit records and television.
How about bullets on the chart? I always hear about that if an act's got a bullet, they can get booked. If they don't have a bullet, they can't get booked.
Well,
does that make a difference?
It makes a difference, yeah. One of our acts this year stumbled into a very big hit record, Mel McDaniel, Baby's Got Her Blue Jeans On. Big hit record. And his bookings went from being a low level to a very high level. We were turning down dates on him, so yeah, that's true. Of course, there are hits and then there are hits. Some hit songs have tremendous impact on careers. Others don't. But generally speaking, a hit record is what makes the difference.
But aren't there some acts that are great live acts that never have a hit record or very seldom?
Oh, yeah, and there are also some artists who are great singers who are not great live acts. Vern Gosdin, for example, is probably the best singer in the business. But he doesn't electrify and excite a crowd.
So a lot of hit records don't mean a lot of bookings for him.
That's right. That's right, because he generally is known throughout by bookers and by the fans. He doesn't put on a good show. He knows that himself. But he puts on shows often enough to work, you know, to his satisfaction, I'd say.
Where are most country acts booked?
Well, there's really not an area in the United States where they're not booked often, I'd say, with the exception of Miami, Florida, the big Latin population down there.
Oh, so it's nationally, but what kind of venues? Do they mostly work clubs or small concerts or package shows?
There are more nightclubs than there are anything. That's one of the beauties of country music. They work in and everywhere. It would be impossible to say they work here or there. They work anywhere. And thanks to the appeal of the Grand Ole Opry, the Nashville Network's having a tremendous impact on revising an interest in country music.
Okay, but how lucrative are clubs? How lucrative are concerts? How much does an act make at a club?
Well, it depends. Depends on the size of the club. Most clubs are smaller than concert settings. For example, Murphy Center. If you could fill that up, if you had the ability to fill that up, your price would be a lot higher than it would be to fill up Skull's Rainbow Room downtown in Nashville, which probably seats 300 people.
But most beginning acts are going to have to play a place the size of Skull's.
Exactly.
So how much could they get for that? Just ballpark figure.
Well, a small 300, I'd say $1,500 a week. It's hard work. It's real hard work. It destroys their personal life, destroys their family life often. And just the monotony of performing night after night after night, you know, to faceless, nameless people. It's hard work. I don't know if I would ever have the determination enough to be an artist.
How much should an act work?
Well,
I mean, don't you reach a point when it's useless to stand up on stage again another night, and then there's the other side of the coin that they've got to get out and do personals.
That's right. It's a mixed blessing. You can't answer that question. From an agent's point of view, the more they work, the more the agent makes.
The more you make, yeah.
From the other side of the coin is this: I never saw an artist ever reach a point where he cut back on work, because there's always somebody in his retinue and his following that needs to be paid. Band members, insurance for the bus, the cost of doing business. It's an extremely difficult judgment call to make.
So mostly an act works personal appearances for their bread and butter. And
you better know it. 90% of the income comes from personal appearances, I would say.
Do you work with an act on their show, try to get the show better?
No, we tried to go into that at one time, and basically we're just 3 yards in a cloud of dust bookers. We get them engagements. The marketplace is hard because of the competition, and dabbling in something like that is a luxury I can't afford to get involved in anymore.
Do you book any acts without a record deal? Or do you only look for acts with a record deal?
We try to restrict ourselves just to record deal people. All of our people have them, thank goodness, but there are an awful lot of artists in Nashville now that don't have record deals.
What makes you decide whether to book an act or not?
Well, it's not an easy decision to make. We're asked constantly by artists to take them on. That's a very, very heavy responsibility. We don't have an open door policy. And consequently, we try to keep our roster small and manageable. We have competitors who will just book anybody. You know, all you got to do is show up and say, list me, and they say, fine, I'll list you. But we try to keep ours small and try to sell people we believe in, people we enjoy being with, and people we can be proud of.
Now, in New York and L.A., or New York and California, the law is such that you can manage, you can't manage and book. In Tennessee, you can do both. Do you think that's an advantage or a disadvantage?
Well, I hope it doesn't change simply because I do both. I heard it said one time by Wesley Rose that even though it could be argued that there is a conflict of interest, that sort of latitude and laxity is what helped build Nashville and helped made it possible for people like Wesley Rose to run a giant publishing company and manage Don Gibson on the side, or Roy Orbison on the side. The law probably said he couldn't do that in California, but in Tennessee the law didn't say anything on the subject, so it gave birth to our industry. I'm in favor of it so long as it's not abusive and so long as it doesn't get out of hand.
Now, managing and booking an act, do you ever promote a concert or promote a showcase? Work as a promoter too in order to get this act exposed?
Yeah, and it's risky business if you're doing it for money, but most showcases are done without the idea of making a profit. The purpose is simply to give an artist exposure in an area.
So you haven't seen like Jerry Clower or somebody needs to be in Oklahoma City and you can't find a booker there, so you would promote a concert? You wouldn't do that?
No, I wouldn't do that.
How about TV bookings? Do you do those?
We've got a specialist in our company who does nothing but coordinate media appearances for our artists. It's a full-time job.
They don't pay though, do they?
No.
So why do you book TV?
Well, in the first place, we normally book them during off days, Monday through Thursday. Under the most ideal circumstances, people work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then they're home. Now, I said under the most ideal circumstances. That relates to basically half the year. The other half of the year, when the fairs are going on, fairs and outdoor festivals, basically from Labor Day until Memorial Day, or vice versa. The artists work 7 days a week. Our industry has turned into a 10-month-a-year industry, maybe a 9-month-a-year industry. You can forget working from December the 15th until March the 1st for all practical purposes.
So you just try to pick up a few dates here and there, but the rest of the time you're trying to work fairs and clubs.
Right.
And
we try to get our artists to take care of the home life during that 2.5-month period and just shut it all down and then get ready to hit the road. Their problem is how do you hold a band together? It's a big problem. If they budget properly and manage the resources properly, they can aim toward, bridging that gap. But the truth of the matter is most artists don't manage their affairs properly, and consequently, that's the reason I say the most needed thing in our industry today is good management.
Do you sit down with your acts that you manage and work out their budget and say, if you do these dates, you're going to make this, it's going to cost you this?
No.
That kind of stuff?
No, we don't do that. Most of our artists do, however, have management, and I'm pleased with the quality of management they have. There's good management and there's not so good management. Anybody can be a manager that wants to be one. All you got to do is put up a sign and say, I'm a manager.
Find an act. Do you get input from managers on kinds of dates to book?
The good ones we do, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If they'll sit down and talk with you intelligently and you can begin to share goals, it's always helpful to do that. But a lot of managers don't do that. A lot of managers, the first time they have a problem, they just change agencies. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the artists...
But don't they have contract with agencies?
Not necessarily. No. Some do, some don't. I would say that the majority do not have contracts.
Is that good or bad?
Well, I think it's bad simply because of the basic nature of people to want to run from a problem. Most managers, the first problem that comes along, they run from it. They go to another agency and they create a mask of confusion and a mask of dust and smoke, and they don't deal with the problem. Jerry Clower and I have been together for, I think, 17 years now on a handshake. But that's a rare, rare exception.
Okay, now you're a manager. What are some of the functions that you do as a manager? What are some of the problems you don't run from?
I don't run from anything, but I don't have to run from anything. I've got a very talented man that's committed to me, and I'm committed to him, and he's a mature, feet on the ground, good businessman. His costuming, his publicity machine, the material for his albums, when his albums are recorded, how they're recorded, the marketing plans, all of those I provide input into, and I'm very much involved in all that.
Do you sit down and go over a career plan every year? I mean, do you get his goals?
Sure do.
And try to shoot for those goals?
You betcha.
How about a marketing plan? Do you work on those?
And he's the master marketer of all times. When I met him, ironically, when I met him, he was the exact same age that I am right now while I'm talking to you. And when I met him, he was 46 years old. He was the director of marketing for Mississippi Chemical Corporation. We're talking about Jerry Clower. He supervised 35 salesmen that sold $355 million worth of fertilizer. My point is, he knew about marketing. He knew about selling. He knew what it takes to be successful in the marketplace, if selling's what you're all about. Now, you heard me say a while ago that selling is what we're all about. So many times I'll counsel with him and get his advice on the right way to merchandise him.
How come you've only managed basically one act or a relative handful of acts?
Well, I really hadn't had the time. In addition to managing one act, I've also been president of and owner of a very active talent agency. So really I've had two full-time jobs. I couldn't have managed another act. And right now, I couldn't. If I took on another act, I'd want it to be someone at the very least who was just like Jerry in terms of character and in terms of energy and bigness. And it's hard to find people like that.
So that's what you would look for in an act if you were going to manage another act. You'd want those attributes.
Let me tell you the 3 attributes that I feel every artist ought to have in a management relationship if you're going to be successful. Number 1, the artist needs to have the ability to grow. A lot of artists today have peaked out. They've reached their plateau. And they're either going down or they're going level, but they're not going up. You need to connect with an artist who has the potential of going up, so you can bring that out of him and be a part of it. Secondly, you need to have an artist who's manageable. The vast majority of artists are not manageable.
Why?
I think it has to do basically with trust again. We talked about that a while ago. But the vast majority of artists want to say, want to hire you to be their manager, and then once you shake the deal, they say, now here's what I want to do. Here's what we're going to do. Let me tell you what we're going to do. Well, that's giving a man a job and not letting him do it. So the artist has to have the ability to grow. The artist has to be manageable. And then finally, the artist has to have the capability of paying you. I've seen so many people go into a management relationship on the come, and very seldom do they work out. It's hard to keep somebody excited forever if you're not benefiting them in any other way. So I contend that an artist must be able to pay you, and pay you in a way that keeps you excited.
How much does a manager make from an artist?
It varies. The average agent, the agenting function takes anywhere from 10 to 15% of an artist's income, and the average management fee would be in that same range.
Mm-hmm.
You recall reading about Tom Parker and Elvis Presley. I think it was a big lawsuit, and ended up, I think he was charging him 50%,
Mm-hmm.
which the judge ruled, as I recall, the judge ruled that was unconscionable. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with the judge. I don't even have to hear what the colonel did for him. I think 50% of anybody's income is just simply excessive. But for services rendered, anywhere from 1 to 25%
Mm-hmm.
would be acceptable, I would say. Say 15% for booking, 10% for management, or 10 and 15%.
Mm-hmm. So if you booked and managed an act and they made $100,000, you'd still only get $25,000.
Right.
And you'd have to pay office,
Mm-hmm.
rent, phone bills, all that stuff.
Right.
How much would you have to make a living?
Well, a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the good news is that very few people will want to manage anybody that can only generate that kind of income, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously you can't do your job if out of your $25,000 you have to pay your own overhead.
Mm-hmm.
Now, conceivably, you could strike a deal where the artist paid your phone bills,
Mm-hmm.
postage bills, your secretarial assistants.
Does that happen often?
It never has happened in my circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it has happened. There are all kinds of ways you can skin a cat or tailor a deal. But still, all of that has to go on too.
Mm-hmm.
So consequently, if you're talking to an artist, you've got to talk to somebody who can generate $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year in order to help you achieve your goals as a manager.
Which brings us back to personals. They're going to have to stay on the road all the time.
That's right.
How about as a manager and as a booker, you're talking about, risking family life and all of that by being on the road, being away so much. Do you take that into account? Do you sit down with an artist and talk to them about that, or is that up to them?
I think it's up to them. My observation is that most people who love the roar of the grease paint and the smell of the crowd love that more than they love anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And no amount of logic will ever talk them out of it. That's just been an observation of mine. Most people are on the road. It's easy to say I'm on the road because I have to be, but most people choose to be in that position.
Can you take, as a manager, could you take an unknown act and make them a superstar? Can a manager do that?
Yeah, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure did. If you don't think Jerry Clough was not a superstar, you don't know your country music history too well.
Mm-hmm.
He's an absolute superstar, and he was an absolute nothing when we met. And he'd be the first to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But he brought a lot of pluses to the table. He brought talent, he brought desire, he brought the ability to work hard, the ability to keep me motivated. So the answer is yeah.
Can someone be a superstar, an artist be a superstar without a manager?
Yeah, but the odds are against it.
Mm-hmm.
It would be such a freakish thing.
I'm getting at how important is this manager? How important is management?
I wouldn't be an artist today and not have a manager.
Mm-hmm.
But I would sure discriminate and be choosy.
How does an artist find a manager?
A lot of luck, a lot of intuition,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of interviewing. It's an extremely personal relationship, extremely intense relationship. In my judgment, it's a lot closer than a marriage because you can't kiss each other and make up every night.
Mm-hmm.
You got to deal with each other's pocketbook day after day after day, and you don't have that personal intimacy, that romantic intimacy that tends to get you over so many rough points as husband and wife.
Mm-hmm. You're involved in a lot of activities, the Country Music Association. If it's going on in Nashville, you're involved with it. Does that help you as a manager? Do you see that as helping your role?
I hope so. Sometimes I wonder, you know. I think it's 6 of one and half dozen of another. Mainly it's kept my interest diversified. It's also given me contacts in areas that perhaps I wouldn't have had had I not done that. I would vote yes for diversity. I think that's your question.
Now you said that a manager could be a manager just by hanging out a sign that says I'm a manager. How about a more practical way? How does somebody start in management? They don't really hang out a shingle and say I'm a manager.
No, well, I'll give you a good example. I met a gentleman, and he's real nice. I can't think of his name now, but I could get it for you. I could give it to Alan. I received a phone call last month from Blake Mevis, who is a very successful producer. Blake and I know each other through our activities in the Country Music Association. Maybe this answers your earlier question. Blake and I have become friends because of our involvement in outside activities. Blake called me and told me that a good friend of his, who is a manager from up north, wants to move to Nashville, manages several acts up there, wants to move to Nashville and become established as a country music manager. Would I agree to meet with him and expose some open doors to him, talk to him about opportunities, just generally meet him and make him feel welcome and counsel and advise him? I agreed to do that because of Blake Mevis. I met with this gentleman. He couldn't have been a more delightful chap. And I thought to myself the whole time I was talking to him, boy, I thought I was doing Blake Mevis a favor by meeting with you. The truth of the matter is, Blake might have done me a favor by introducing me to you. And certainly, you're the kind of man that I want to see get into our music industry and lift us up, help us be better. So this guy's going to end up hanging out his shingle. I'm going to help him be introduced to artists. I'm going to see that he's invited to parties. I'm going to take him to places and help him make the right connections. That's the way he's going about it.
Now, you've counseled a lot of people. I mean, you've talked to a lot of people. Do you ever function like a lawyer or an accountant functions in charging per hour to come in and for advice? I'm not saying in this particular case, but do you do that as a manager? Or do managers do that?
Yeah, I'm sort of like a hired gun. I'll do anything for $1, as long as it's not illegal. But I'm always complimented when people want to pay me a fee for services. The difficulty is deciding on what a fair rate would be, a fair fee would be for anything that's intangible as good advice.
Well, lawyers charge.
Sure they do.
Do you base it on
They've got their act down, though, pretty well. They've got sort of a...
Non-negotiable for them, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask, how does somebody get into the business? You're talking about personal contacts. Suppose you're cold, no contacts. Do you find some act in the middle of nowhere?
I think the most wonderful way in the world to get into our business is through the apprentice system. The young kids that are coming out of this school here and out of Belmont, I'm so filled with admiration for them. They have so many doors open to them, and it's just a wonderful feeder system. I cannot imagine penetrating our business today as a young person, especially now, without coming through either Murfreesboro or through Belmont College.
You know, I've heard you say kind of that you get frustrated as a booker from not having good management from your acts. I know labels have that problem. They don't have good management. Do you sense there's a frustration and a gap in the country music industry from lack of good management?
Oh, there's no question about it. The problem is, how do you get people to go into management? You know, somebody's got to pay them. You take somebody like, well, at the very top of the heap would be Ken Cragen or Ray Katz. These are guys that make $1 million a year. Then you got folks down at the very bottom of the heap, guys that make $5,000 a year, if that. In fact, you and I both have a friend, a young gentleman that we both know who's been dying to get into management, and he's had every difficulty. He's even kept a part-time job because the people he's trying to manage can't afford to pay him, and everybody's just kind of betting on the come. And that's so hard. It's so frustrating. It's if you have to look at the odds are he won't make it.
But management has the image of being very lucrative. A lot of people say they want to get management. You can make a lot of money.
Well, you can.
Where's the gap there?
Well, there's a big gap. You got the haves and the have-nots, kind of like they talk about the countries, you know, the have-nots and the haves. Those haves make, it's really not a fair thing because the people who start making the big money become in such demand and they become so well known that they get all the plum assignments. And they can't afford to give up, well, here's Ken Cragen. He manages Kenny Rogers. My gosh, what could be more lucrative than that, with the possible exception of managing Lionel Richie, which is just what he did. How much more successful can a man be in that field?
So you can either make a killing or barely make a living.
Feast or famine, that's the way it appears to me to be.
How about, now you've seen management come through booking. You came through booking.
Yeah.
Chip Pay came through booking with you.
Chip does a great job.
Is that a good way to get into to management?
I think it's the best. I get impatient with my own knowledge about certain things. I wish I knew more about publishing, for example. I have a very weak knowledge of that. I wish I knew more about record companies. But if I had to do it all over again, I'd probably do it exactly like I did it. There's just something, as I told you, if an artist's income, if 90% of it comes from booking, then doesn't it stand to reason that you should spend time learning that area rather than spend all of your time concentrating in areas that produce 10% of the income? And
if you're making money for the artist, you're making money for yourself.
Right.
How lucrative is it to be a booker? Now, the bookers work on commission, right?
Our office is just exactly like the New York Stock Exchange. We'll process 300 telephone calls a day. Between calls we make out and calls we accept, it averages about 300 phone calls a day. And the agents who work there just literally are, they're puts and calls all day long. We'll tell you who's available, we'll give you prices, we'll call you back day after tomorrow, after you've met with your committee and so forth. We fill out cards, we put holes in books. And there's just constant activity, constant flurry of activity. The agents have to do the dirty work in a way. On the one hand, now the good news about being an agent is you don't end up being dependent on any one artist. All you do is hustle numbers. I personally would advise someone to go into agenting before I would advise them to go into the management business.
How much would a good agent make? Successful agent?
Oh, I'd say anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 a year. That'd be my opinion.
And how about one starting out? It's back to survival?
Yeah.
You get a dollar here and a dollar there?
Yeah, well, it's, you know, it's like selling at any level. When you first start out, you're not making any money for anybody. Once you acquire a reputation and require some degree of skill, it's just amazing how business comes your way.
So you're seeing, what you're telling me is you're seeing that management and booking is basically a salesmanship job.
No question about it.
Within the industry.
Especially the agency end of it all. I think a good manager has other people doing his selling for him, doing his bidding. On the other hand, in the case of Jerry Cliver, there's not a business deal that he's been involved in 17 years that I hadn't been the salesman, the negotiator.
I was going to ask you about the, further functions as a manager. Don't you get involved in the record deals and the publishing deals and all of those sorts of things?
Absolutely. I just signed Jerry's record deal yesterday, Sunday. I worked in my little office out in Franklin all day long and just dictated a memo and had it signed today.
How about endorsements? Do you go after those?
You better know it. Yeah. And most agents don't get involved in that. Most agents are so busy trying to keep their head above water, handling those 300 phone calls every day. That's really flesh peddling at that tough level. Agents get to sit back and put the feet up on the desk and put a big cigar in their mouth. That's the glamour side of being a manager. But the problem is you can be fired like that and all of a sudden you're out of work.
But all the deals that you negotiated, you still get money from that later on.
Sure you do. Sure you do. But in the agency field, it's kind of hard to be fired when you're dealing in numbers. Your strength is in numbers. Your strength is in an 18 or 20 roster.
So if you have enough acts to represent so that somebody's always available.
Right.
Then you can make a living.
There's more security as an agent than there is as a manager.
But not much security in anything.
That's right.
Okay, well thank you Tandy Rice for being with me today. This is Don Cusic with the Music Biz.